Sometimes, the ugliest truths about human nature reveal themselves not in grand gestures, but in the smallest, most ordinary moments. A crowded bus, a single empty seat, and a decision that would change the way every passenger saw one man forever. On that rainy night, he believed he was making a choice that no one would notice. But within minutes, that very choice would become the center of silent judgment, whispered disgust, and an unforgettable lesson that still lingers in the minds of those who witnessed it. The rain had been falling all evening, coating the city in a glistening sheen of streetlights reflected on wet asphalt. The bus stop was crowded, filled with weary commuters clutching umbrellas and bags, their coats damp from the storm. When the city bus finally arrived, hissing as it opened its doors, passengers hurried inside, grateful for the warmth. The interior smelled faintly of wet jackets and tired leather seats. Overhead lights flickered as the driver announced the route, and people shuffled into narrow aisles, searching for places to sit. Among the passengers was a woman in her late 30s. Her appearance was unremarkable at first glance: simple clothing, a plain scarf, a bag tucked neatly at her side. But her posture spoke volumes. She sat with quiet dignity, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her eyes betrayed exhaustion, the kind that comes from long hours of unseen labor. And yet, she had a certain calm about her, a presence that seemed to anchor her amidst the chaos of the evening rush. Next to her, one seat remained empty. It seemed like a small, lucky opening in a bus that was rapidly filling. A few stops later, the bus doors opened again. A man in his early 40s stepped inside. He was sharply dressed, wearing a tailored suit, polished shoes, and carrying a leather briefcase that looked expensive. He scanned the bus quickly, his eyes narrowing as he took in the limited options. Every seat was occupied, except the one next to the woman. For a moment, he hesitated, his gaze lingering. Then, with the faintest flicker of disdain crossing his face, he shifted his eyes away. Instead of sitting, he chose to stand, planting himself in the aisle just a few feet away. To him, it might have felt like nothing. A decision made in silence, without words. But to the other passengers who noticed, it spoke volumes. Whispers began almost immediately. "Did you see that?" Someone muttered under their breath. "Why didn't he sit?" another asked softly. A teenage girl near the back shook her head in disbelief, her earbuds dangling as she watched the man grip the railing tightly, his expression cold, detached. The woman, meanwhile, remained perfectly still. Her face betrayed no emotion, though her eyes dropped for the briefest second. She adjusted her bag slightly, as if to make more space, even though she didn't need to. This was not the first time. She knew that all too well. People had avoided her before on trains, in waiting rooms, in restaurants. She had learned to endure it silently, to breathe through the quiet sting of rejection. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the bus was full of witnesses, and the man's choice had become a performance in plain sight. The atmosphere shifted. Some passengers looked at him with disgust, others with curiosity. But all of them, every single one, were waiting to see what would happen next. The bus rattled on, bouncing over potholes, brakes squealing at every stop. The man stood tall, his hand gripping the metal rail. He tried to keep his eyes fixed forward, but the weight of silent judgment pressed down on him like a physical burden. Every lurch of the bus made him shift awkwardly. His briefcase knocked against his leg, and droplets of rainwater slid from his coat onto the floor. Still, he refused to move. The woman's calm presence beside the empty seat only amplified the tension. She had not spoken a word, had not lifted her gaze, yet somehow she was the center of everything. Passengers glanced from her to him, back and forth, as though silently comparing them. Her quiet composure, his stubborn refusal. It was a standoff made not of words, but of choices. And the longer it lasted, the heavier the silence became. Outside, the storm raged harder. Rain lashed against the bus windows, blurring the city lights into streaks of white and red. The driver hunched over the wheel, navigating carefully through slick streets and sudden traffic. Inside, tension brewed like static electricity. The woman sat as though carved in stone, unbothered on the surface. But the man, his jaw tightened with every passing second. He shifted his weight, adjusted his grip, trying to act unaffected. Yet his body betrayed him, restless, uncomfortable, increasingly unsteady. The bus seemed to sense it, as if something were about to break. And then, without warning, it happened. The bus lurched violently, brakes screeching, tires skidding against wet asphalt. Passengers cried out, clutching at seats and rails as momentum hurled them forward. The man's grip slipped. His briefcase tumbled to the floor. His body pitched downward, headed straight for the hard, dirty aisle. Gasps filled the air. And in that split second when humiliation, injury, and consequence collided, the story took a turn no one could have predicted. Previously, on a rain-soaked city night, a crowded bus carried dozens of weary passengers. Among them, a well-dressed man who refused to sit beside a woman, an act so small, yet so loud, it drew silent judgment from everyone aboard. But as the bus hurtled through slick streets, fate delivered its own twist. With a violent jolt, the man lost his balance. His briefcase crashed to the floor. His body lurched forward. And in that moment of chaos, the story truly began. The man's polished shoes slipped against the wet rubber mat of the bus floor. His hand, once gripping the overhead rail with calculated composure, slid away helplessly. Gasps erupted as his weight shifted, his shoulders pitching downward. For a heartbeat, the world slowed, his face contorting with panic, his briefcase skidding across the aisle, passengers flinching back as if bracing for impact. But then, something unexpected happened. A steady hand reached out. Firm fingers gripped his arm with surprising strength, anchoring him before his body could crash into the aisle. The woman. The very same woman he had judged unworthy, the one he had refused to sit beside, was now the reason he remained upright. The bus steadied, though the air inside had shifted dramatically. The man froze, his breath caught in his chest. For a split second, their eyes met, his wide with shock and humiliation, hers calm and unwavering. Passengers watched in silence, the unspoken truth washing over them all. The one he had rejected had just saved him from complete disgrace. The man quickly pulled his arm back, straightening his suit jacket as if to hide his embarrassment. But the damage was done. His carefully crafted image of control, superiority, and pride had crumbled in front of everyone. And there, in the middle of a bus filled with strangers, he felt smaller than he ever had before. Awkwardly, he bent down to retrieve his briefcase. The leather was scuffed from the fall, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the handle. When he rose, there was nowhere else to turn, nowhere else to hide. The empty seat beside the woman remained open, waiting, daring him to take it. For the first time that night, the man lowered himself into it. The seat he had rejected now became the only place he could go. The silence that followed was heavy, charged. Every passenger aboard felt it, the poetic irony, the unspoken justice in what had just unfolded. But for the man, it was more than silence. It was humiliation that clung to him like the rain outside. As the bus rumbled forward, his mind spiraled. He tried to justify his choice, convincing himself it had been about comfort, about space, about anything but her. But the truth gnawed at him. He had judged her. Instinctively, reflexively. And now she had seen his weakness, steadied his fall, and forced him into the very seat he had avoided. He adjusted his tie, tapped his fingers nervously against his briefcase, and avoided looking at her. Yet the weight of her quiet composure beside him was suffocating. She hadn't spoken a word. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any accusation. Around them, passengers exchanged glances, whispering just low enough to sting. "Did you see?" She caught him. Poetic, isn't it? Imagine, after he refused to sit down. The man could hear them, even when they thought he couldn't. Each murmur chipped away at his pride, exposing the fragility of the mask he wore so carefully. For the woman, however, the whispers meant little. She sat as she had before, calm, poised, her eyes fixed out the rain-streaked window. She had no need to correct them, no desire to amplify the moment. Her dignity spoke louder than gossip ever could. Just as the bus settled into uneasy quiet, flashing lights illuminated the fogged windows. Red and blue streaks danced across the wet glass, accompanied by the sharp wail of sirens. The bus slowed, brakes hissing, as uniformed officers appeared outside, signaling for the driver to pull over. Passengers shifted nervously, craning their necks to see. The storm outside had swallowed the city, but here was something else, something urgent. The driver muttered into his radio, then turned in his seat. His voice carried a weight of authority as he addressed the passengers. "Stay seated. The police need to board." Gasps rippled through the bus. Confusion. Fear. Curiosity. What could they want here? The doors opened with a hiss, and rain-soaked officers stepped inside. Their eyes swept over the passengers, scanning each face carefully, methodically. And then one of them pointed. "Sir, you stay where you are." The bus went silent. Every passenger turned to look straight at the well-dressed man who only moments ago had been too proud to sit beside her. Previously, a rainy night, a crowded bus, and one man's choice revealed more than he intended. He had refused to sit next to a woman, a silent act of judgment that every passenger witnessed. But fate turned the tables. When the bus lurched violently, she was the one who steadied him, the one who caught his fall. Humbled, he finally sat in the very seat he had avoided. And then, just as silence settled, flashing lights and police officers stormed the bus. Their command was clear. "Sir, you stay where you are." The passengers froze. And in that moment, the man's pride collapsed under the weight of something even heavier. The man's eyes darted toward the officers, wide with disbelief. His grip tightened around the briefcase on his lap as if it were a shield. What's the meaning of this?" he stammered, his voice breaking the tense silence. But the officers didn't flinch. Their boots echoed against the bus floor as they stepped closer. Passengers shifted in their seats, whispers rippling like a current. "Is he in trouble? What did he do?" The man shook his head rapidly, forcing a nervous smile. "There must be some mistake," he insisted. "I'm just on my way home." But the authority in the officer's eyes silenced him. The lead officer raised a hand. "Relax. You're not under arrest," he said firmly. "But we need to speak with you." Confusion washed over the man's face. Not under arrest? Then why the spectacle? Why single him out in front of everyone? The officer continued. "There was a hit and run a few blocks back. Witnesses described someone leaving the scene, matching your description. Suit, briefcase, mid-40s. We have to verify where you've been." The man's face flushed crimson. Passengers gasped audibly, exchanging sharp looks. To them, the details didn't matter. The damage was already done. He, the man who thought himself above others, was now under suspicion in front of everyone he had silently judged. As the officers questioned him, the woman sat silently, watching. She made no move to intervene, no effort to humiliate him further. Her calm presence beside him only deepened his discomfort. It was as if life itself had placed her there, beside him in his lowest moment, a mirror reflecting back his arrogance. For the first time, he dared to glance at her fully. Her expression was steady, unreadable, but her eyes carried something he couldn't ignore, an unspoken reminder that dignity doesn't need noise, and strength doesn't need status. He felt small under her gaze, smaller than he had ever felt before. The whispers grew louder now. Imagine, first he wouldn't sit, and now this. Karma doesn't waste time, does it? The man wanted to vanish, to disappear into the floor of the bus. Every pair of eyes on him felt like a judgment, every whisper a sentence. But the loudest voice of all was in his own mind, replaying the moment he had refused the seat, the moment he had chosen pride over humanity. And the bitter irony, the woman he had dismissed had now seen him at his weakest. Twice. After a tense exchange, the officers checked his identification, radioed back, and finally nodded. "You're clear," the lead officer said. "You weren't involved. Apologies for the inconvenience." A collective sigh of relief swept through the bus. The man exhaled shakily, his shoulders sagging. But the relief was short-lived, for humiliation still clung to him. Because though he had been cleared of the crime, he wasn't cleared of the judgment. Every passenger had already made up their minds about who he was. And so had he. As the bus continued its route, he sat motionless, staring at his reflection in the rain-streaked window. For the first time, he didn't see the polished man in a suit, the image he worked so hard to project. He saw a coward, a man who measured others not by their worth, but by his own prejudice. And beside him, quiet and steady, sat the woman who had shown more strength in silence than he ever had in pride. He finally whispered, almost too softly to hear. "I'm sorry." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her silence carried more power than any words could. That night, on a rain-slicked bus, one man learned a truth he would never forget. Dignity is not defined by appearance, status, or wealth. It is defined by how we treat one another in the smallest of moments. He refused a seat. But life gave him one anyway, beside the very person he needed most. And in the end, he was speechless.
If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful lessons.